what I would hate it to be, and probably what happens a lot, is they're like, woohoo, we have our values as a company, or we have our values as a individual, and then you never think about them ever again. It's kind of like you get
Yeah, and
a mission statement
unfortunately,
and it's never
yeah.
looked at again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's way too many companies that do that. They invest the money, they invest the time to do organizational values work, and they create a beautiful sign to put on their wall, but then that's it. Like the idea of actually living and operating in alignment with those values sometimes becomes a challenge. And again, I think a big part of that is because it's kind of confusing. Like when we get to actually implementing it, people are looking at each other kind of going, well, now what do we do?
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Powerful Impact. I'm your host, Shay Wheat, founder of Grace and Ease Productions, where we support entrepreneurs like you to profitably scale your business with events, allowing you to make sales faster with greater predictability and less team burnout. And I want to be a little bit real with y'all. I don't know about you, but to me, it feels like I am being constantly bombarded with messages about what I should do, what I need to do, what others want me to do. Well, our guest today would like for us to get clear about what is really most important to us, and let that be what determines the way we think, the decisions we make, the actions we take, and the results we get. Robert Macphee is the creator of the Excellent Decisions Value-Based Leadership Program and the author of Living a Value-Based Life. He is the former director of training for the Canfield Training Group and is an expert in experiential learning, peak performance, values, clarification, and leadership. Please help me welcome Robert to the Creating Powerful Impact stage. How are you?
I'm good. I'm thrilled to be here. We've been bouncing messages back and forth, and we finally get to do this. I'm really
I
happy to be here.
know. And we've got a few people in common, which is always really fun.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
over there drinking wine. It's wine's in my backyard, same area, same time zone. It doesn't tend to always happen that way. So I'm super excited to have you here.
And
And
just to be clear, you're talking about where I live with my wine drinking habits. I live in Sonoma County, so there's a lot of wine here. It's not
there
like
is a lot of wine here, and it is the area that you're living, not that you're living surrounded by wine in
not
your
that we were
house.
boozing it up before we got started today. So
I love it. Thanks for the clarity.
both
So,
of our reputations are at stake. So
right?
mm,
Oh my gosh. So I want to just dive on in.
perfect.
I really appreciate you having, that desire for us to get super clear about what is really most important to us. I would love for you to share, like, why is it so important for us to be thinking about it, looking at it, what those values are, and where in the world do we get started?
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on it with that idea of being bombarded by everyone wanting a piece of us and wanting to tell us what we should do and we have to do and we need to do. And in today's world, it's just gotten crazy with media and social media and advertising and our coworkers and our boss. And it's just never ending. And if people aren't clear about their own values, then we become vulnerable to all those what I call external influences. And suddenly we're living our life being pushed in all these different directions by all these different people. And it doesn't lead to a life of really feeling fulfilled and satisfied and on purpose and like we have meaning in our personal life or our professional life. So
Mhm.
there's something really magical about taking the time and putting in the effort to clarify what our highest values are, what's really important to me. And in my experience, like most people haven't done that. Like they can't articulate their highest values. And part of what I think is a big part of that is the fact that values are kind of confusing. Like the
Yeah.
work that I do now with people on values emerged out of the fact that doing my own values work, I found very confusing. And I had a really hard time landing in a place where I had a list of my values that I could use and really feel like I'm implementing as a tool to live my life more the way I want to live it and run my business more the way I want to run it. So
Yeah.
that was where I felt stuck.
So it's kind of like a roadmap essentially, or guiding principles or things that you kind of butt up against it. It's like, does that match my value? Somebody's asking me to X, Y, and Z. Does it match my value? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, cool. Let's have a further conversation. Is that how
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at utilizing it?
Yeah, and I think most people who are listening to a podcast like this are familiar with the fact that there's kind of a progression we go through as we're living our life where we think a certain way, which drives the decisions that we make, and the decisions that we make determine like what we do, what the actions we take, and ultimately those actions create the results and the experiences that we're having in our life. And and so through that whole pattern, it's like, well, what is really determining the way we think? What is really determining the decisions that we make? And I think the biggest benefit of being really clear about our values is having kind of a guidepost, kind of a target, kind of a way of measuring where we want to go so that we think differently, we decide differently, like we make different decisions, especially the decision about saying no,
Mm.
because most of us hate to say no. And all these external influences are pushing us in all the directions they want us to go. And we want to be nice and we don't want to be mean. And so we say, well, I'll do a little of this, a little of that. Next thing you know, you don't have any time for what's really important to you. And in a lot of cases, because people really haven't identified that. So,
Oh,
we talk about wanting to live on purpose and have meaning. But honestly, how can we do that without knowing our values? Because it's ultimately our values that will be able to measure whether we're on purpose or not, or whether we have meaning in our work and in our life or not. So it's a guidepost, yes, but it's also like a map. Like it's a guideline, like guardrails that we can use to keep us headed in the direction that we've decided we want to go. And at least more often say to all those other people, well, thank you. I'm glad you're working on that and good luck with it, but that's not mine. Like that's not aligned with my most important projects or most important people or whatever it might be.
mm-hmm. Okay. So I think I understand the concept. What's a concrete values? Like, what are some examples, or how do we even start to determine what they are for us? Because what I would hate it to be, and probably what happens a lot, is they're like, woohoo, we have our values as a company, or we have our values as a individual, and then you never think about them ever again. It's kind of like you get
Yeah. And
a mission statement
unfortunately,
and it's never looked
yeah.
at again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's way too many companies that do that. They invest the money, they invest the time to do organizational values work, and they create a beautiful sign to put on their wall, but then that's it. Like the idea of actually living and operating in alignment with those values sometimes becomes a challenge. And again, I think a big part of that is because it's kind of confusing. Like when we get to actually implementing it, people are looking at each other kind of going, oh, well, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And what's unique about the approach that's in my book and in the work that we do is that we divide values into two separate categories.
Yeah.
So we take values work and we say, okay, we're gonna look first at our what we call our priorities, like what is important to us,
Mm-hmm.
either individually or organizationally, like what are the things that are competing for my time and attention. And like for me personally, number one on my list is my relationship with my kids. That's the most important thing. Like I want to make sure I'm putting time and attention on that, getting the results and experiences that I want in that area of my life. Then there's the contribution that I want to make. And then there's my health and my well-being. And then there's my business and creating a financial success, which also kind of connects to the contribution. So those are things like those are like what is important to me. And then the other list is what I call ways of being, which is qualities and characteristics. Like this is how I want to show up in the world. And to me, that's different. So the things that are on that list for me are like humility. I want to be humble. I want to be curious. I want to be open to new ideas. I want to be calm and peaceful. I don't want to be flying off the handle and overreacting to things. I want to be kind and caring. I want to be strong. Like sometimes I get too kind and caring and calm and peaceful, but I also want to be strong. So for me, those two lists are really important. They really articulate what I want to be doing in the world and how I want to be showing up, but they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And for me in values work before I did like I tell people I've been doing this work for 25 years. I only have three pieces of original content. This is one of them because I needed to do something to clarify values to make it not so confusing. When I put kind and caring in the same box as my relationships with my kids, they're not the same. Like they're just different. But as soon as I had two separate lists, I can look at my list of priorities and say, am I putting my time and attention on what's most important to me? It's a yes or no question. I either am or I'm not. And if I'm not, I can make a choice, a decision to put more time and attention in the areas that aren't going the way that I want and make the changes that will have me living my life more in alignment with what's important to me. And the
Mm-hmm.
same thing with the qualities and characteristics. I can say, am I living my life with humility? Am I being kind and caring? Am I being strong? Am I being, calm and peaceful? And it's a yes or no question. I either am or I'm not. And if I'm not, I can look for ways, maybe I should shut up and listen more and be a little more humble, like, but I can literally navigate through my life and incrementally get a little bit more in alignment with those highest values. And for me, that's what gives me the experience of living my life on purpose with a sense of meaning and making a difference and doing what I'm here to do, not what everyone else thinks I should do or have to do or need to do.
Okay. So where do you get started?
Well, for most people, they're getting started right now because we just planted the seed. And it's really interesting when I get into these conversations because most people know that values are important. Like very rarely does someone say to me, values, that's stupid. Why would I? They know values are important. And then the next step in the conversation is, well, like nobody knows their values. I have not been able to find an actual study. I'm too busy like moving forward with all this to pause and do, spend 2 years doing a study. But I know empirically when I talk to people, it's very rare that someone says, oh, yeah, I know my highest values. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most people can't articulate what their highest values are. And that's what then they feel guilty. They're like, oh, God, I should know my values. This is important, blah, 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 blah. But then I offer this thing about the two different categories, and people like perk up. They go, oh, this is so cool. No wonder I don't know my values. Nobody ever told me I needed to divide them into two categories, and they're willing to engage in the conversation. So hopefully that's what's happening to people as they're listening in on this conversation is they're going, oh, that's interesting. What are my priorities? Asking that question. And when we work with people, we do kind of an intellectual approach with asking a question, answering it over and over again. It could be, what is important to me? What else is important to me? What else is important to me? Take 5 minutes, sit down with a piece of paper and just brainstorm a list of all the things that are important to you, and then go back and identify which ones are most important. Now, if we have more time, we go deeper. We do guided visualization. We tap into the real heart energy. We could, have people thinking ahead and connecting to how they really want their life to be. And the same thing with the ways of being. We
Mm-hmm.
have people ask the question like, or actually most of the time we have them complete a sentence saying, it's important to me to be, and fill in the blank. And again, take 5 minutes, blank sheet of paper, fill that in. And it's not like voila, you're done, a lifetime of perfect values alignment, but you've taken the first step of creating these two lists, which then you can move into the step we call clarify. Put your list on your computer, put it on your nightstand, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it on your, rear view mirror in the car, whatever, but keep looking at it and saying, oh, that's how I ended up with like kind and caring. Like they're kind of the same. If you make me pick, I'll pick caring. But I've kind of pondered that and I've gone back and forth. And there's been times when I took one off the list, but then I missed it and I brought it back. It's an ongoing process. But what I end up with is that experience because I keep it in the foreground. I keep remembering and revisiting. It allows me to live my life. When some crazy thing happens and somebody's, oh my God, we need this report and we need it by tomorrow, whatever. Like, okay, do we really? Like, slow down, like
Mm-hmm.
calm and caring or calm and peaceful, right? Like, let's take a breath
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, like, is this really, it's a little easier for me when I run my own business. It's not like my boss is running it, but still, like, I make decisions like, does this really line up with what's most important to me? And it
Yeah.
becomes, I hate to say no. I'm one of those people who hates to say no, but it is a lot easier for me to say no because I'm saying yes to something that's more important.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So, okay, great. We've got the list. We've, written some things down. We've put it on our computers and our bathroom mirrors, and we're starting to look at it and we're starting to adjust it. What exactly can people expect to start seeing change in their life once they kind of get clear on what these highest values are?
So the things we see happening for people, I'm not a big believer in like magical thinking. So, I've been around this world of personal development for a long time, and there's some people like way out there on the skinny branches, in the movie The Secret. I was actually in the room when a lot of those things were filmed with Jack Canfield and all those people. It was actually filmed at a meeting and we were talking about Lisa. I think
Mhm.
Lisa was there as well.
Yeah.
Um, but the movie kind of makes it a little bit easier. Like all these magical things are going to happen. Just, visualize whatever. And I will say that some pretty magical things happen when people get clear about their values and they start saying no to things and they start creating space in their life and they start meeting people that
Mm,
they just weren't seeing because they weren't
mm,
looking for them.
yeah.
And they start getting ideas and opportunities can start to emerge and things start moving in the direction that we're focusing on. Because I mean, really values clarification is a refocusing. It's kind of going from not focused at all and trying to keep it all somehow in our awareness to saying, no, this is what's really important to me. And we start focusing on this, like right now, I'm focusing a lot on building my business. This whole conversation about values has been something that people have responded to in a way that they haven't always responded to all of my work. Sometimes this work about coaching and consulting and helping people requires a lot of explaining and, clarifying and all that
Education
kind of
and
stuff. This is like you had me at hello kind of stuff. So I feel like there's a huge opportunity. So I'm focusing in on my business and also the idea of contribution because I feel like this is a huge contribution. But as I focus in, I meet people and resources show up. And I think more than anything else, like I get ideas like, oh,
mm,
I never thought I could do this and I could do it. I could focus over there. In my opinion, that's kind of how you and I met because I was in conversation with Melanie and I was sharing this. And it's like, oh, you should meet Shay and you should be on her podcast. And those kinds of things just start happening, a lot of which I don't think would have been happening had I not really focused in and gotten clear about
mm,
what's most important to me. And then even clearer, like on that short list, like what's the one thing I had just a little bit of extra time, where would I put it? What would I focus it on?
yeah.
Um, and then actually, obviously, doing it is critical as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So I get it now. We've had it on the personal side, but a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs and have their own businesses. And how does this work actually apply to their business?
It applies almost exactly the same way. There's a
Okay.
couple of things that I have come across in engaging much more deeply in this conversation that I find really interesting. One is that the personal values piece, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders, they're looking for more engagement. Like they're looking to create a culture in their organization. People are realizing that, you can't just offer people more money. You need to create a place where people love to work.
Yeah.
And that's not really easy to do, but values is a really important part of this because people want to work for an organization that's not just making the best widget and selling it for less and has a bunch of customers, whatever. People
Mhm.
want to feel like they're doing something really worthwhile. My oldest daughter actually graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in computer science and data science. And so far over my head, I can't tell you anything more about it. But she went to work for Microsoft, which was a great opportunity for her right out of school. And, 9 years of college after grad school and undergrad. And all of a sudden she's making all this money and it's great. But she wasn't like jumping out of bed, excited about what she was doing. And eventually, even though Microsoft clearly wanted to keep her, they were offering her stock options and bonuses and benefits and all this stuff. She just wasn't that excited
Yeah.
about it. And then a headhunter, I think, found her and she ended up working for an organization called the Fred Hutchinson Institute, which is doing cancer and other medical research. She's actually now doing data science focused on AIDS vaccines, AIDS
Oh,
research. And she's lit up. She took a small pay cut, but she's still making great money. And she just is excited. Like she's going nowhere. She loves the people she's working with. She feels like she's doing really important work. And they have a culture there that is just so engaging and so full of like life. But the interesting thing about it is that the key to creating that as it relates to values is not creating really powerful organizational values, putting a sign up on the wall like we were talking about. It's actually about helping your people connect to their values first.
mm,
Because if you put the sign on the wall, but people don't have the context about whether it really lines up, I mean, really lines up, like I know my values, so I know if it lines up, then it's just a sign on the wall. So the studies do show, this one I did find a study about. The studies show that the key to creating a really engaging culture where people feel really great about where they're working is more about helping your people connect to their personal and individual values and let them relate it to how they feel about work, rather than starting with the organizational values and just hoping that people will feel really great about the company they work for.
Mhm.
So that's one thing for leaders and people to think about as they're transitioning from, first of all, they should start with their own personal values as a leader and make sure that's clear. And there's actually, I think, two steps. One is, what are the subtle differences between my personal values and my professional values?
Mhm.
Like for me, if I show up at work and I'm always peaceful and calm and I'm always kind and caring, that's all well and good. But there's a time where, values like discipline and focus and strength and those kinds of things, I need that at work. It doesn't necessarily conflict with me being calm and peaceful, under pressure or whatever. But we have a concept we call borrowing values. If you really want to make a big change in your business, maybe calm and peaceful isn't the way to go. Maybe focused and discipline would work better. So borrow those values, and apply them in that specific
In that
area.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I mean, because if you're thinking about attracting talent and if you're having a lot of turnover, it's probably because either their values don't fit within the company culture or it's not very clear what the company culture is, right?
Hmm.
And that's why they don't stay that long.
Yeah.
So it's also an opportunity for us as the entrepreneur to be like, okay, if I'm having a lot of turnover, what's happening? What's happening with me? What's happening with the company? What's happening with the culture that we're creating? And maybe we're not looking for the right person or talking about it in the right way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
really like saying, what is it about us that can help you reach your goals and dreams and hit on your values? And seeing that within what it is that we're doing as the big picture for the company movement, right?
Yeah. I did this work recently with a construction company, and it was so profound for me because at the beginning, honestly, I was like, okay, this is a construction company. I don't know if this is going to work here. And they work on concrete in this huge yard. Like I toured their facility. I was like, okay, I'm so far out of my element. You can't imagine. I used to work at a lumber yard when I was much younger. That's the closest I ever came. And I went in with their leadership team to do this organizational values work. And I was like, oh my God, if it works here, it's going to work anywhere.
Yeah.
And they started with like, well, what do we do? We make concrete here. Like fill the trucks with concrete. Okay, but what else we do? We went deeper and went deeper, and they started coming up with things. These guys, like they're like hard hat out in the yard kind of guys, right?
Like
And
burly
they're coming
guys.
up with
Yeah.
all these ideas about how they create opportunities within their company for people to grow and be on a career path, and they contribute to their community because they're not the best neighbor. Like you don't necessarily want to have a concrete company next door to you, but they're
Right.
really committed to being a good neighbor. One of their ways of being actually turned out to be dust free.
Oh,
First time, probably
wow.
last time ever. But it
Yeah.
was so profound to watch this group of like construction people get past like the main thing they do, which is concrete, and get into innovation and research and contributing to the community and creating opportunities for their employees. It's like I walked out of there that day on cloud nine. I was so happy because I really did feel like, okay, if it works here, it's going to work anywhere. And they kept going. Like it wasn't just a sign on the wall. They kept engaged in this being engaged in this conversation about one, the things they do, because the question we ask with organizations is not so much what's important to you, but just what do you do?
Hmm.
What are the things that you do? And the ways of being are kind of the same. Like, how do we want to do them? Like, how do we want to show up with our employees? How do we want to show up with our vendors? How do we want to show up in our community? And the same kinds of words show up as far as being kind and being caring and being compassionate and being aware, whatever. It's different for everyone,
Hmm.
but the same process.
Beautiful. Beautiful. This has been really kind of eye-opening to take a look at values from a different perspective. So I want to thank you for that, Robert. If somebody is interested in learning more about how they can do this with their organization or learn more about you, your book, how can people get in touch with you? And do you happen to have a gift for our audience today?
I do. I have a gift for your audience. So we have a program we call the Values Advantage. So at valuesadvantage.com, it's really focused on leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners. But whoever's listening to this episode, what I wanted to do is we're not going to kind of vet you. Just make sure we know you came from here. Go to the Values Advantage. And what we ask people to do is book a call. Let's talk more about this. I mean, today we had a limited amount of time. Yeah, I'm talking fast. We're going through this as fast as we can. But if there's something about this work, about the power of having values clarity and the difference it can make for yourself personally or for your organization, your team, I would love to just talk more with you about it. Like I said, we have all these great things going on, but we're always looking for more people who want to be part of this. So best thing, book a time. Let's get on the phone. Let's talk about it. And again, whether you're truly like a leader, like you have a team of 100 people or whatever, or if you're just thinking about a business you want to start, no vetting for your people. We're just going to get on the phone, talk more about this and see. Maybe you just want to get a copy of the book and read about it yourself. That would be great. We have an online course and a virtual course we do. Or maybe you're ready to take it into a whole big construction company with concrete. I don't know. But I'd love to talk to your people. The whole idea of creating powerful impact without values. I would just ask the question, like, how are you going to do that? How are you really going to, you could create powerful impact, but what I want is people to create the powerful impact that is aligned with those values that are uniquely yours. And that's, I think, where the sense of meaning and purpose and more productivity and satisfaction really comes from.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you for that. So the link is in the show notes. Make sure you go ahead and click on that and let Robert know you came from us. No vetting required. My last question for you, Robert, is what is a takeaway or memorable note you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I would say the one takeaway that I would want to leave people with is just to remember that if you don't do this work or some version of this work and you really can't articulate what your highest values are, values are simply what's most important to you. So if you can't articulate what's most important to you, then chances are you're living your life in alignment with what's important to someone else. And for most people, that's kind of a wake-up call. Even if we're surrounded by really nice, caring people, we all should really be living our life and making our decisions and taking our actions driven by what's most important to us. And it's not a selfish thing to do because you'll end up helping more people and making a bigger difference, making a bigger contribution. But just keep that in mind. Like if you aren't clear about what's most important to you, chances are your thinking and your decisions and your actions are being driven by what's important to someone else. And stop doing that.
Stop doing it. Perfect. Thank you, Robert, for joining us. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on another episode of Creating Powerful Impact. I'm excited for you to take all of these lessons and these resources that you've learned here, implement them, and create even more impact in your world. Until next time, have an outstanding rest of your day. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Creating Powerful Impact podcast. If you are a successful coach, speaker, author, or thought leader who would like to be on this program, simply visit creatingpowerfulimpact.com/guest. If you are someone who got something out of this interview, would you please do me a favor and share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on your socials. Also, if you know somebody that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Creating Powerful Impact. I love seeing all of your posts and great guest selections. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and they really mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more about us? Head on over to our website, graceandeaseproductions.com, or follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Just look for Grace and Ease Productions on your favorite platform. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.